Okay, hello everyone. We are going to get started on the action-based learning webinar. So very excited to have all of you here to showcase one of the things that we are most proud of at Ross through a lot of different lenses. So I'm excited to tell you about a lot of these experiences. We are going to start out by introducing myself. So my name is Taya Sapp. I'm a Senior Associate Director on the admissions team. I've been at Ross for a while now, 8 years, and I'm also a proud Wolverine. So I did undergrad at Michigan, love sharing all the great things about Ross with prospective students, and excited to tell you about one of our kind of hallmark experiences at Ross, the action-based learning experiences. So we're going to start out by sharing a couple of key differentiators, and then we are going to go on and go into a little bit into detail about some of these areas through stories around action-based learning. So the very first differentiator is very relevant to this webinar. So we really believe that we are unparalleled in terms of the breadth and depth of hands-on learning experiences at Ross. I have looked at other schools. I'm very familiar with what this looks like, and I'm very confident to say that there is no other school that has near the number of experiences and the depth that our students are able to experience in action-based learning. So if you learn best by doing, there's really no better place to be than Ross. The next is that we have 9 of 10 business specializations ranked in the top 10, which means you are getting a really well-rounded education. So we are in the top 10 for a lot of different areas. US News ranks schools in operations and marketing and finance and all these different areas. So what happens is, since we're in the top 10, that means you are getting a strong education across the board, and there's a lot of variety in the action-based learning experiences that you can have. It's not just in one particular area, it's in a lot of different areas. The next one is that we have over 100 graduate programs that are ranked in the top 10. So you can take up to 10 of your 57 credits during your MBA outside of Ross. So we have one of our students going to talk to a couple of experiences where she's taken some classes outside of Ross and how that really complements the experiences here. And then the last one is that we are #1 in alumni effectiveness. And what that means is The Economist does a survey of current students to see how often alumni are involved in their experience as recruiters, as mentors, and we are ranked #1. And that's actually really relevant as well, because when we get into talking about MAP projects and some of these other experiential learning opportunities, alumni are very involved. So they might be on a board of an organization that you're working with. They often come back to sponsor our MAP projects. They are very involved in the experience, and I think they're largely responsible for why we have so many different opportunities as well. The next thing I really want to talk about is kind of the value, why we think action-based learning is important, and kind of give you a couple of reasons. The first is we really think it's giving you a deeper understanding of a particular area. You really get to experience things firsthand and can learn from failure. It's a safe space where you're in a learning environment, and it's okay to fail in these times. But it's making you learn at a deeper level. The next one, we are consistently told by employers that Rossers are very adaptable. They are confident in situations where there's a lot of ambiguity, and we attribute that a lot to the familiarity that students have with action-based learning experiences. So we are training people to be adaptable and be comfortable with ambiguity, and those are skills that employers highly value. And the last one is related to career changers. So we have a lot of students at Ross who are career changers. I'll get into that in the next slide. But I think the opportunity to try some of these different things gives you a chance to understand if you actually like doing it before you go out into the world and are doing a consulting project. It gives you an understanding of what that's like, or just gives you a deeper knowledge in a particular area. It also gives you exposure to some of these areas where you might not have experience. So that way, when you are doing interviews, you can talk to a particular experience that you've had, so that you know the vocabulary, and you have a couple of experiences to talk to even before you've done an internship in a particular area. So I wanted to touch real briefly on the top stat there that 89% of Ross grads are career switchers. That's an industry, function, or both. We, on a lot of our webinars, will dive a little bit deeper into the areas that people go into and the geographies. The important thing to note is that it's very diverse. There's a lot of people in a lot of different areas. But for this webinar, I think the most important statistic is how many people are career switchers, because I think it's very relevant how much action-based learning prepares you to try something different, if that's what you're interested in. So next I'm going to go over fairly quickly what our framework is basically for action-based learning at Ross. What that means is we call it real experiences. So we break that down into 4 different areas. We say we want every student to have the opportunity to start a business, advise a business, invest in a business, and have leadership experience. So there are a variety of different ways. I have a quick slide. This is really overwhelming to look at. There's lots of words, but I'm putting it up here really just to demonstrate the breadth of experiences that I mentioned earlier. This is not even all of them. This is a sampling. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that a lot of people think of Ross as action-based learning, as they should, but there's a number of courses that are still lectures or have simulations or have these things. It's not all about action-based learning. There's a lot of different ways that you can learn at Ross. But if you want to do action-based learning, we have courses, co-curriculars, a lot of different experiences. So this is just a sampling. We have a lot more on the website, and we're going to talk through even more once I have the students on here. So with that, I am going to have our first student introduce herself. Brooke, do you want to talk a little bit about why you chose Ross and give everyone your background?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Brooke, MBA 2. Prior to coming to Ross, I was working in education. So I did Teach for America, taught high school on the south side of Chicago for 3 years, and then pivoted into working in education technology and did curriculum development at a startup called Albert. And at Albert is where I became really interested in technology and product management, and also a startup. So I chose Ross because there's a lot of really great resources for students interested in careers in tech, like product management, and also tons of resources to explore entrepreneurship. So this summer I was interning as a product manager at Grubhub in Chicago, and it was an awesome experience. Yeah, and it was great.
Great. All right, Murat?
Hey y'all, Murat Johnson, native of Atlanta, Georgia. I went to Georgia Tech for undergrad, studied chemical engineering. Before coming to Ross, I was at Diageo PLC. It's the world's leading producer of beverage alcohol, particularly spirits. You've probably heard of many of the brands. I won't list them off. But yeah, if you don't know what the company is, you've probably seen one of our products before. While I was there, I was in ops, maintenance, as well as startup of beverage alcohol facilities. I came to Ross to build a broader ops skill set, as well as to build my business acumen. And I was drawn here by the people, action learning, as well as the Tauber Institute, which I'm a part of.
You want to say real quick what the Tauber Institute is?
Sure. So the Tauber Institute, it's a partnership between industry sponsors, the Ross School of Business, as well as the Engineering School here at Michigan, another top 10 ranked program. And the 3 of them partner up to build a really broad and rigorous ops curriculum.
Great. And then London.
Hi all, my name's London. Prior to coming to Ross, I spent about 4.5 years at a boutique healthcare consulting firm. And the firm that I was working at operated in a pretty niche market. So part of my emphasis to come to business school was to kind of broaden my scope a little bit. And I think Ross provided a lot of avenues to do so. Having worked at one company, getting exposure and having some real work experience during business school was important to me. And so I think some of the programs that we're going to talk about, like MAP and others, kind of helped me achieve that goal. In addition, I'll echo Taya's statement about alumni engagement. I remember just being a prospective student and having alumni respond to my random cold calls kind of meant a lot to me, and was able to see kind of their engagement from a pretty early start.
Great. So one of the things when we talk about action-based learning, the first thing that people think about with Ross is MAP. It stands for Multidisciplinary Action Projects. I'm going to do a quick overview in case you're not familiar with it. We've actually have an entire webinar devoted to MAP because it is such a critical part of the experience. But I'm going to have London and Brooke, since they're the two MBA2s, talk about their MAP experiences in a second to get a little bit deeper dive of what that looks like. For those of you that aren't familiar with MAP, we are on a quarter system at Ross. So the first 3 quarters of the first year, all of our students do their core classes. So the marketing, the finance, the accounting, management and organizations, all of those courses. And then the 4th quarter, they're doing a consulting project. So there are over 100 different options that students get a list of to choose from. It's everything. The sponsors range from a nonprofit in India, a startup in Israel, to a big company like Amazon or Microsoft in the US. And there's a lot of variety in what the projects look like. We have all of them on our website, so you can search through them at any point. All of them for the past 5 or 6 years. You can look at them in terms of geography, because about 50% of them are international. Or also in terms of industry, because there's so many different industries that they cover. The important thing to note is that MAP is a full 7 weeks, so that's 1 full quarter, and students aren't doing anything else at the same time as that. So some schools will have a sponsor project where you're doing a consulting project, but it's an elective, and you might be doing that along with other courses. This is something that our students are doing completely full time. So most summer internships are usually 10 to 12 weeks, and this is 7 weeks. So it's pretty significant, and students often think of it as an internship before their internship in the summer. It is technically a class, so you do have a faculty advisor, and you are working in a small group, and so you have both deliverables for the sponsor and for the class as a part of it. But because it is a class, there is no additional cost. So whether you are spending 2 weeks in Miami with the Miami Dolphins, or you are spending 5 weeks in India, that the sponsor pays for all of your costs associated with the travel. And the last thing on here is this past year, so London and Brooke's year, 95% of the teams presented to an executive level sponsor. So you are getting a lot of exposure to people that are very senior in the company. So London, do you want to start off and just kind of do an overview of what your MAP was?
Yeah, so my MAP project was really cool. So I did a U.S. market entry strategy for an Israeli-based medical device startup. This past year we had, I think, like 6 or 7 different Israel startups for MAP projects, and I ranked all of them. I think different people prioritize what they want to get out of MAP. Some people use it as a way to get exposure to an industry that they might want to pivot into. For me, I was like, I want to go to Israel, so that's what I prioritized. But awesome experience. I had there was a team of 5 of us. I had not worked with any of the other people on my team prior to MAP, but we had, I would just say, like an amazing time, just kind of getting to know each other, getting to know our sponsor really well. I think one of the cool things for me, I'd never worked with a startup, coming from a larger organization. So I think it was also really neat to see how much the startup and their team appreciated the work that we were doing for them. And it was also really cool just to see how early on in our, MBA process, we were able to kind of come in and immediately add so much value to this company. So I look back at MAP as one of my fondest experiences for sure during my first year.
Nice. Brooke, do you want to share your MAP project?
Sure. So took a little bit of an opposite approach from London in that I had really only worked in small organizations. So I was at a school and then a startup. So I wanted experience working at a bigger company. So I ended up ranking Gulfstream Aerospace as my #1 choice and got on that project. And if you don't know what Gulfstream is, if you know the song Like a G6, G is Gulfstream. It's like private jets that start at $70 million. And there's a Ross alum who is the head of the marketing department there. So our team worked on a go-to-market strategy to help Gulfstream better understand millennial billionaires, and specifically billionaires in the Asian region, because that's where a lot of the wealth is growing right now. So it's a super interesting project. Someone on my team is a vet and like used to fly fighter planes, so he had a lot of like the aerospace knowledge, and then a lot of the other team members were just really interested in doing something kind of fun and different. So for me, like I had worked in like nonprofits and in education before Ross, so I just wanted to do something completely different. I would say working with like low-income students in Chicago and Asian billionaires is like the most different you can get. So it was really fun. And yeah, we were able to present our go-to-market strategy to a senior team of sales folks. So these are actually folks that are working directly with the Gulfstream clients to sell them the aircraft. So it was really fun to get to speak with them and hear about their experience going over to places like Beijing and Shanghai to try to get people to buy Gulfstreams.
Really interesting. I didn't know that much about the project. It's good to hear.
It was super fun, yeah. And it also really highlighted like the Ross connection. Like this woman who was the VP of marketing had been really trying to get a map project for a long time. So she was super excited to have Rossers there in Savannah, Georgia, and she's excited about like developing a pipeline of talent in the future. So it's great to get to know her as well.
Yeah. That is a good example of the alumni effectiveness survey that I was talking about earlier. There was one question that was submitted around what the process is for choosing a MAP project. So what it looks like is the students get a list of over 100 different projects over winter break. So this is coming up for Murat soon. And then they get to rank them. So both of these guys mentioned that it sounds like they ranked their project pretty highly. Most people get something in their top 5. So our MAP office assembles the team. You don't need to do interviews or anything for your project. It's completely based on the ranking that the students do, and then the MAP office takes time to build a diverse team with people from different backgrounds. So it is a little bit different, or a lot different than the summer internship recruiting process, but it is great because most people get something they're really interested in working on. All right, so from MAP, which is, like I said, technically a course, but very experiential, we're going to talk about a lot of opportunities for the for courses that students take that have a big experiential focus. So you see MAP listed there, but I was hoping maybe, London, you could talk about one of your classes that you've taken.
Yeah, so I'm in a course right now. So it's the longest title. It's Financing Commercialization of Technology, a Venture Capital Practicum. But essentially what the class is, it's a semester-long course, and we meet every Wednesday. And the first hour, David Brophy, the finance professor here, brings in a different guest speaker, often people who are really well known in their like respective spaces, to talk about the different components of bringing any sort of technology or new innovation to market. So we had a lawyer come in and talk about patents. We've had people come in and talk to us about term sheets, about how you market a new idea. And then the remaining 2 hours of the course and kind of throughout the rest of the week, we're broken off into small groups where we're working with local startups, actual CEOs and founders of companies on their pitches. So every week we kind of dive into something new. So we started off looking at their business model and then go through actually how would we evaluate this company, so putting a valuation number on them. We last week went through a list of potential investors, and so essentially at the end of the course, our group, likely myself or someone else in our group, will be pitching our startup company to a group of investors to actually try to raise some capital for them. So I don't know if it gets any more like action-based than that. But really, really cool course, really neat design, and I think it also speaks to the strength of the entrepreneurship community in Michigan, which was something that I was completely unaware of prior to coming to Ross. So getting to meet a lot of local CEOs, a lot of venture capitalists, and professors and people involved in academia, so really super neat course.
Yeah. Fun fact about entrepreneurship in Michigan: there's only 10 states that have more than one unicorn startup, and Michigan actually has 3. So those are startups that have $1 billion valuation. Yeah, so Duo has actually been acquired. So Duo is one, but StockX, and then Rivian is the other one. So it's an automotive company.
And one of the founders for Duo was just our speaker in this class.
Oh, really?
Excellent.
Yeah, very experiential. So Brooke, I know you're taking some courses outside of Ross. Do you want to kind of speak to what those are?
Yeah, so I'm taking 2 classes right now outside of Ross, one at the architecture school and one at the School of Information. The class at the School of Information is an intro to Python class, and like I said, I want to go into product management. So it was recommended to me to take a Python class, and I'm sure, as you guys know, you can take these kinds of classes online, and it's really popular to quote unquote self-teach, but for me, I really needed like the structure of having a class and having assignments. So I'm in this class. It's been awesome. There's actually a handful of Rossers that are in the class together, some who are doing a dual degree with either user experience or data science. And so it's nice because we can all study together and work together on the projects. But over the summer when I was at Grubhub as an intern, I was doing a lot of data analysis that required an understanding of SQL and Python. So it's been great to come back to school after the summer and kind of level up on those skills that I know I'm going to need in my career. And then the second class that I'm taking is a class at the architecture school called Space as a Service. And that class is about how technology is sort of disrupting the real estate and built environment industry. It's taught by 2 architects that are pretty high up at WeWork and have done a lot of the design and architecture work for WeWorks all across the globe. So it's been a super interesting class, and for that one for me is just kind of more of a special interest course. I've always been really interested in like urban planning. May or may not use it in my career, but it's just kind of a fun way for me to engage with that outside of being in all business classes.
Yeah. So there's a lot of courses up here. Most of these are elective courses. I wanted to highlight a couple, and then I'm going to have Murat maybe mention a few things that are on the horizon for him. But one of the ones I wanted to highlight is the Living Business Leadership Experience. That is an elective that students can take in their second year. That is a new course. It's in its 3rd year, where students actually have the opportunity to be managing an entire part of a business. So while MAP is often making recommendations and doing a consulting project, this allows students to work at it's largely startups that they're working at and help move a direction of that business forward. So it might be making a digital marketing strategy for a company or optimizing their website. It could be helping them be able to scale. So maybe they just have 1 or 2 stores and they want to grow and expand. So they're actually at the table working with CMO or the founders and figuring out how they can expand that company or move it in a positive direction. So that's something that's really unique to Ross that I think is very interesting. Another popular course that's up here is Business Leadership and Changing Time, which is finally known as the CEO's course. That's something that's kind of a great class because a different CEO comes in each week, and the people in the classroom get to take on the role of that CEO. So they kind of have a case of a problem that they had to the CEO face. So recent one was Home Depot had used a case of some of the credit card information of their customers being stolen. And so the students actually in that class take on the role of the CIO and the CEO and figure out how they're going to respond to that, while the rest of the class takes on the role of all the different stakeholders. So the credit card company itself, the customers, the board, some of the government organizations, just depending on what the company is, there's different stakeholders, and they, you get drilled with questions on that. And then the second half of the class, the CEO actually speaks to what the experience was and why they made some of the decisions they did. So I think that's a really popular elective. There's a lot of different things up here. I'm happy to send you a link and a follow-up to the email to some of our electives so you can read further. But Murat, did you want to talk about Tauber a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So one piece on this page on the bottom right, there's the Tauber team projects. So we do get 3 credit hours for those, and those are in place of a traditional internship. So what happens, it's a 14-week project, and we will recruit for projects instead of for specific firms. So major firms, Amazon, Microsoft, I think Oracle is coming this year, Anheuser-Busch is coming this year, will pitch us projects, and so we'll know exactly what we're working on, and we get to work on those. So for example, last year when the projects was a machine learning project where the 2 students use machine learning algorithms to innovate plant design for one of the major auto manufacturers, and we're able to use those processes to help design the factories of the future for this firm.
All right, and you see at the bottom too, we're going to talk about student investment funds a little bit later, but all of them actually have a course associated with them too. So I think that's something to put in the back of your mind for right now until we talk about that a little in a few minutes. So we're going to talk through these using that framework that I mentioned earlier. So start, advise, invest, and lead. So we are going to have some of the students here talk about some of their experiences under each of those categories. So Brooke, I know you've been involved in a lot of the entrepreneurial things. So do you mind speaking to some of these, Dare to Dream and Women Who Launch?
Yeah. Sure. So I came to business school with a business idea that I wanted to kind of test out while I was here. So one of the first things that I did when I got on campus was apply to Dare to Dream. If you don't already know, Dare to Dream is like a 3-stage program where students learn how to come up with a business idea, do customer discovery, validate it, understand the financials of your business, and eventually launch. So last year in the first semester of school, I did the first phase, which is basically going around and interviewing your potential customers. And this is something that a lot of people, want to do, but don't always make time to do it. But with Dare to Dream, you really have like the accountability of not only the other students, but also the faculty to get you to actually go out and have conversations with people about why they might want to use your product and what pain point your product would solve for them. So it was a super valuable experience, and also just a little plug, they pay you to do this, which is really great. And it just, it's kind of like a nice little reward for being a part of the program. And then this quarter, I'm in phase 2, which is more about understanding the financials of your business and whether or not it's feasible and how much money, venture capital, you would potentially have to raise in order to launch. And then I'm a Zell Scholar this year, which basically just means I'm kind of like an advocate for the Zell Lurie Institute. So that means just like volunteering at different events that they have. This upcoming Monday, I have an opportunity to pitch my business idea to some of the funders of ZLI. So that's going to be a really great experience. And then also I just spend a lot of time talking to prospective students about entrepreneurship because it does bring so many people to Ross. And then lastly, I'm really involved with an organization called Women Who Launch, which is a student club that is focused on encouraging women to engage in entrepreneurship, whether as founders, funders, or team members. That is like probably a line that I've practiced a bunch of times because I've had to raise corporate sponsorship for our club. So I'm used to saying that, but it's we try to be a really inclusive organization. Not everyone wants to start a company and not everyone wants to go into venture capital, but a lot of people want to be involved in startups and understand how they work. So we put on a lot of different events for students interested in learning about these topics. So we've done events on like what is VC and how does it work, and we try to make it really inclusive, especially for people who are just starting to engage with this kind of material. We know it can be intimidating sometimes to walk into a room of predominantly men who have worked in finance or venture capital or private equity and like ask questions. So we try to make our information sessions really inclusive of everyone, no matter where their background is. And then I'm also responsible for planning the symposium that we put on in January. So that's like a half day of programming. We bring in a keynote speaker. We have panelists. This year we have Rossers coming from really great female-founded startups like The Wing and Glossier and Chief to speak on our panel. And also we just secured corporate sponsorship from Bumble, which is a huge win for us. They're going to be coming and doing some programming around their new product called Bumble Biz, which is meant for encouraging women to use their app to network with each other. So there's just like a ton of great things that the club is doing. And I've also found that like I've become really good friends with the other ladies who are in the club. So it's been a great community for me.
Yeah. It's Women Who Launch. Actually, a couple of these experiences, I debated if I should put them in the lead category because the program has, it really started last year and it's over 350 people now. So there's a lot of different things, organizing these events and getting managing multiple stakeholders and doing a lot of these things are also great leadership opportunities. So
definitely, I spend like as much time on Women Who Launch as I probably do on my classes, so or probably more actually. But it's a great way. It's also a great networking opportunity, and something I tell students, prospective students, a lot is like you only have 2 years to be a student, and you only have 2 years to reach out to literally anyone you want to and say, I'm a student and I want to learn. Will you talk to me? And that is a huge advantage of being involved in some of these organizations because you can use it to network and potentially find jobs and internships.
Yeah. All right. So Real Advise, we have a couple things that we're going to speak to here. Open Road is one of them. And then we have a number of different clubs that are related to consulting experiences. So maybe why don't we speak to those, Murad, if you could speak to those experiences first, and then Brooke, you can talk about Open Road after Murad here.
Sure. So Data Analytics Consulting Club, or as we call it, DAC, is a club that's focused on using data skills to solve problems for real companies. So I'm on the board of this club in a faculty relations position. But right now, the team that I'm on is solving operator performance issues at one of the major auto manufacturers. So, it's an opportunity to use data tools that some of us have, varying familiarity with, whether it's Tableau, whether it's SQL or Python. I think there are some projects doing R as well. And the projects aren't constrained only to manufacturing. There are some in the marketing space as well. It's about 50-50 split, looking at consumer preferences, trying to understand retention rates, things like that. It's fantastic, and it's just growing every year. So we're really working on increasing the number of projects for next year. Another one that I'm in is Community Consulting Club. So this one, I'm a member of one of the consulting teams. We're doing a capital and fundraising plan for a local nonprofit arts organization. It's been fantastic to just apply some of the things I learned in the first quarter, even with financial accounting, and then tie it back to some of the capital experiences that I've had in the past. It's nice to see the action learning working so quickly.
Yeah. So why did you join these clubs?
Sure. So as an undergrad, I think I realized that a lot of the chemical engineering concepts that I learned, I didn't understand until I did them in industry. So, things like phase equilibrium and mass transfer, they're not much different than financial accounting or big data tools for me, right? These were concepts that, I may have understood in class or may have had trouble understanding, but once I was in the field doing them, it all clicked, right? And I realized that Ross is a place where I could do the same thing with business skills. I came here to improve my operations skills, to improve my business acumen. As someone coming from an engineering background, this is a perfect way to do it, in my opinion. So yeah, the way I see it, I did 7 weeks of classes, and then starting at fall B, it's pretty much doing consulting projects all the way through.
Yeah, great exposure. All right, Brooke, do you want to tell us a little bit what Open Road is and what you did as a part of it?
Sure. So Open Road is a program through ZLI, and it's a 1-month-long road trip across the country, and you work with social impact entrepreneurs for 1 week each in every different city. So my team, you're on a team of 4 other people. My team went to Detroit, Chattanooga, Little Rock, Arkansas, and then Tulsa, Oklahoma. And we did little mini consulting projects with different entrepreneurs in each of those places. And kind of similar to what Murat was just saying, it was a great way for me to apply what I've already learned throughout the school year. So we ended up working with 2 different like small farm to table restaurants. and those restaurants needed a lot of cost accounting help in order to price their menus. So we actually ended up using a ton of the resources from our managerial accounting class to help those entrepreneurs, and we actually got on the phone with our professor actually throughout the time to make sure we were doing everything right. And it was just a great experience to get to be kind of heavily involved with an entrepreneur. We're working with people that have like 1 to 5 people on their team, so very, very small. Some of the other teams, like there's 3 teams total that went. One team went up to the Appalachia and just kind of like hung out there, worked with beekeepers and other farmers. Another team worked specifically with immigrant-owned small businesses. So it's kind of like a choose your own adventure. You work with your team to source your entrepreneurs and figure out your route, and then Ross pays for the rest. So covers the cost of the car and the accommodations and food and everything, and it's just an awesome experience. You do it during the month of May, so kind of in between your MAP and your internship. So it's definitely a busy last few months of the school year, but I found it to be really rewarding and one of my favorite experiences at Ross.
Yeah, I have never heard a student that regretted doing open road. Most people really love that. Like, that is the quintessential hands-on experience, I think, after you've learned things. All right. So we have London that's going to tell us about a couple of the funds available at Ross. First, I guess we should start with, what is a fund?
Yeah. So at Ross, we have about 6, I want to say, different student-run investment funds. And so we kind of operate like an actual venture capital fund. So we have an endowment with real money that we are allowed to invest into different companies. So each of the funds kind of have a different spin or a different target. So we have the social venture fund, which looks to invest money in companies that have some form of social impact. We have the real estate fund for real estate financing. I'm a part of 2 funds here in Michigan. One is the Wolverine Venture Fund, which, fun fact, is like the oldest student-run fund in the country, which is kind of cool that came out of Michigan, and the Founders Fund. And so Founders Fund, I think, is particularly neat because we have an endowment that was set aside by Sam Zell to invest specifically in Michigan entrepreneurs. So anyone who's within a year of graduation anywhere in the university, so not just Ross students, can apply for funding through the Founders Fund. So I'm in the process of a due diligence right now. So it's really neat to kind of be able to see some really interesting products that are coming right here out of school, potentially folks that like you might have known or seen here on campus. And then with the Wolverine Venture Fund, so this operates a little bit differently. The fund is comprised of about 40 people, both MBA 1s, MBA 2s, and PhD students from across the university. And that's probably one of the coolest, I think, learning experiences for me, because I get to work with some really smart folks. So we invest mostly in Series A and seed funding, so early stage startups. Historically, I think the fund's investments have been mostly in the health and technology space. There's a lot of biotech kind of coming out of the Midwest, so a lot of the things that we look at tend to kind of go in that direction. But really, we say each year that we try to bring in the most diverse group of fund members, and kind of depending on the experience and expertise that we have in the room, we try to source deals kind of accordingly. So it's really neat to see kind of just a combination of business students, but then also PhDs. So we have people who can really do like the deep dives on the technical things that we might be looking at. So for example, there's a guy on the fund who's getting his PhD in robotics, which I think is insane. He's like one of the smartest people I know. So if ever we're looking at any kind of technology that has any sort of robotic element, we have a literal expert in the room. And so it's been a really awesome learning opportunity for me, particularly as a second year as well. So kind of spending the first year really getting to understand kind of what an investment fund is, what do companies look for when they're investing in startups, and kind of understanding the due diligence framework. And then as a second year, taking on more of like a leadership role. So I led recruiting for the fund this year, so I got to meet and recruit all the MBA 1s. and helping out with the education sessions. So I got to present and lecture at the fund last night. So it's been, I think, a pretty pivotal part of my educational experience here at Ross. And a cool way, I would also say, to engage with alumni as well, because we do have a board of directors, or a board of advisors, excuse me, that we engage with that kind of just help us with sourcing deals and things like that, some of which are Ross alum. So they come back to speak to the fund, to kind of hear presentations that we might put on for them, and are pretty engaged.
Yeah. One of the things I think is so interesting is, so most of the funds, people are on them for 2 years. And so so that makes it so alumni also were on it for 2 years as a student. And so they are incredibly engaged. A lot of them, you're doing due diligence and figuring out which companies to invest in. And most of these funds make maybe 2 investments a year. And so there's so much time and so much passion put into this that the alumni care about how it's doing and want to come back and see how the fund is doing and maybe how their investment that they were involved in is doing. And so they are very invested in the investment fund. I guess it's funny you say. But London, I was curious to know a little bit about like why you decided to join a fund in the first place.
Oh, yeah. So I had zero experience. Like I knew nothing about entrepreneurship, venture capital, investing whatsoever coming into Ross. And so for me, I thought it was just a really cool stretch experience. I was like, oh, that sounds neat. It sounds like something I might want to learn a little bit more about, and kind of found through that process that I'm actually super passionate about the intersection of healthcare and technology. And so Wolverine specifically turned out to be a perfect fit for me. But I think it was a good example of all the opportunities that we have here. So the fund, and I lead recruiting now, so I can say this, we're not necessarily looking for people who have a background in investment management or in finance. We really do take an approach that we want to build like as diverse of a group as possible. So me coming in with my unique set of skills and experiences, not even knowing what a term sheet was or what due diligence looks like or anything about a Series or Seed A fundraise, was still able to come in and bring value to the fund, but then also it's designed in such a way that everyone, we can kind of bring everyone to the same playing field with the way that we design education sessions. So even if you don't have a particular background, you're not going to be at a disadvantage. And so that was really cool to kind of get up to speed and to get those learnings and just to see how much I've learned in the last year.
Yeah. And kind of similar to what Marat was talking about earlier, there's actually consulting projects within a lot of the funds because you're consulting the companies you've had investments in to make sure that they are successful and helping them with different projects along the way so that they can they are successful which is going to be benefiting the fund in the long run as well. All right, so we are going to keep moving on. It's funny, as everybody's sharing their experiences, I'm like, oh yeah, the funds are a favorite among so many students. So MAP is always a favorite, Open Road. It's interesting to say that each time everybody's talking about these, I can name tons of students who would say this is their their very favorite experience about Ross, which I think it says a lot for the experiential learning things here. But the fact that we have 6 student-led investment funds, I think is truly a testament to how popular they are and how we're continually growing the number of funds that we have. All right, so the last category here is LEAD. So there are a ton of leadership experiences at Ross. I mentioned some of the courses, but I'm going to talk, I mentioned the LBLE is the the Living Business Leadership Experience, which I mentioned in the courses earlier. And I'm going to also mention Leadership Crisis Challenge. We have a number of experiences through our Sanger Leadership Center, and they range from Impact Challenge, which all students do before classes actually start, to opt-in things like the Leadership Crisis Challenge. We have the Ross Leaders Academy, a lot of different things for leadership development along the way. But the Leadership Crisis Challenge is something that comes up. It takes place in January every year. And it's literally a 24-hour period where students are involved in a crisis. So they find out more information as the 24 hours goes on. So I think last year's they were leading a cruise ship company who had an environmental leak, and it was affecting the water and the shore in Miami. So this is fictional, but I've heard a couple of people describe it as the most stressful fake experience they've ever had. And what happens is there's actually Twitter accounts that are set up to be, people are very critical of your company after they've had this. There's people that stop you in the hallway and drill you with questions, very similar to what an actual leadership experience might be in crisis.
I have like a very vivid memory of seeing a video of one of my classmates being interrogated by a now alum at MBA2 last year with like the spotlights in her face and like the mic and the phone, and he's screaming, "What about the dolphins? What about the dolphins?" It's pretty funny, but yes.
It's funny to look back on, but like very stressful in the moment because you don't. But I think the point is that you're getting comfortable in these situations. So ideally, you are not going to ever be involved in a serious crisis. But if you're in a leadership role, it's likely that you are going to have to deal with some type of crisis. And this is getting you comfortable with what that feels like and how you make decisions under pressure. So the goal is very similar to a lot of the things that we have with experiential learning as a whole, and in terms of just getting you comfortable and prepared for these situations in the future. Brooke, did you want to talk a little about Design Plus Business and club leadership?
Sure. So Design Plus Business is the club I kind of just got involved with in my second year here, which I think happens sometimes. You know, in your first year, you're trying to limit how much you can do, and there's only so much. But this year, I have a lot of friends that are involved in the club and want to become more involved. So I am the VP of Treks, and I plan and lead different treks with students to different cities to visit companies that are doing really cool things with design. So over fall break, we went to New York and visited 7 different companies, spanning from, huge companies like Google to small startups where we met with the founder and one other employee. And all of them are engaging with design in some way or another. So we did like interactive design thinking sessions at a lot of the different companies. At one of the companies, we were given like a little mini case, and we actually pitched our idea to the CEO at the end of the afternoon. So just trying to get students at Ross to understand how design kind of intersects with all different industries, from tech to retail to e-commerce, to financial services. It's been an awesome experience, and we're planning treks to Chicago, Detroit, and then a local trek in Ann Arbor as well.
Awesome. I wanted to speak a little bit to club leadership as a whole, just as a leadership development opportunity. So both, there's a lot of opportunities to just lead groups of peers. So it's a chance to be getting a lot of people on board with your ideas and managing large groups of teams. A lot of these organizations have several people that are part of the leadership, organizing tracks or organizing different events, working with corporate sponsors. So it's an opportunity to really lead groups of 20 to 30 peers, which is, I think, managing a team of that size is a leadership experience in itself. There's also student government at the school too. So we have section leadership, so individual sections where you take classes your first year together. There's section chairs, and then there's overall student government that kind of helps shape the direction that some of the student experience is going in the future. So they often do surveys and really incorporate feedback into how we can continue to improve the experience. So I think there's a lot of leadership experiences very broadly across clubs, across traditional things through the Sanger Leadership Center, and of course courses as well. So we're going to lead into just questions. We have about 10 minutes left, so feel free to put any questions out there, and I was going to start reading a few. So there was one I saw that was submitted a little bit earlier that was asking about if industry experts visit any of the club events so that you get a good perspective of what that industry looks like and provide guidance. So could any of you speak to that question?
Quick answer, yes. And I would say you see that across kind of a pretty broad medium. So I'll speak specifically, I'm really involved with the Healthcare Life and Sciences Club at Ross. And so we have education sessions for club members. And so those are typically mostly led by students and sometimes second year students and or alum that'll come back and talk about like their recent experiences. But then we also put on broader events So Tay, I think you stepped in on the healthcare boot camp that we did earlier this year, where we had a full day of programming where we brought in industry experts from different healthcare provider organizations, payer organizations, some VC experts, kind of across the board. So, and that's just kind of one example of one particular day of programming that we planned. But I would say all of the clubs in general, I think, do a pretty good job bringing in industry experts, a lot of whom tend to be alum who love to come back to campus. And then in addition to that, just through what the Career Development Office has set up, a lot of the companies come do different, info sessions and events as well. So both on like the education and recruiting side, I feel like you'll get plenty of opportunities to hear from experts.
I can also.
Jack,
oh, no, go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead, Brooke.
No, you go. Yeah, I was just gonna say I can speak to that with women who launch. So at our symposium, we do a panel of all women who are working in venture capital, and it's pretty incredible to see 4 to 5 women in one space that are all VCs, just considering that right now I think like 5% of VCs overall are women. So people are super excited about our club and coming to speak, and it's great to hear from people from across, like there's been people who have come that are just like 3 to 4 years out of school, and then also VCs that have come back that have been in the industry for like 20 plus years. So tons of opportunities to connect with folks there.
Yeah, so as far as DAC goes, like we had someone from Microsoft who was a Ross alum come talk about machine learning applications that they're using machine learning in at Microsoft. And then Community Consulting Club does have advisors for each team. So each team of about 6 students will have an advisor who is a professional consultant, usually at the manager level. And they gave us a workshop on casing and ways to structure our problem solving, other things like that.
All right, so, okay, questions are starting to come in. Let's see, how about, let's do this one about, what about Ross's campus culture do you think is unique, and how that enhances your action-based learning experience as a whole? Any thoughts on that?
I could take that. I think the culture is get involved with a bunch of stuff. I think you've heard from the panel. I mean, we're all really, really busy, and it can be stressful sometimes, but there's just so many resources to take advantage of that I think Rossers do a really good job of just jumping in and getting involved. And there's so many clubs, so many action-based learning opportunities. Like we didn't even cover like some of the ones that are like global immersion, study abroad, like things like that. Like there's so much to do, and I think what's unique about Rossers in terms of the culture is that they're just super hands-on and want to be involved.
I would just add to that and say that a lot of these opportunities and clubs too just are pretty welcoming and super inviting. So I think it's a really cool space to be in for people. I forgot what the stat was earlier, but like 80-something% of people who want to be career changers to actually be able to come in and do something a little bit different without having, any sort of prior experience or prior knowledge. I would say like all of the clubs, the funds, all of these opportunities really are for educational purposes. So anyone, I would say, can come in and kind of take advantage of that.
Yeah, I'll just echo those points. I think what I've found as someone who's not looking to really switch careers that much, I still am interested in getting to know my classmates and understanding the world that they're coming from. As a senior leader, you have to work across functions pretty frequently. And what I found is everyone's really willing to express their experiences, and a lot of that comes out in the action learning experiences.
So there was one question on, I'll kind of put together 2 questions that came in. One was around how many clubs people are involved in and how many of these experiences they have. And then there was another question on how you narrow it down. How do you pick the ones that you're involved in? Does anybody want to speak to that?
Tough question.
A lot of it is just like doing things like figuring out your priorities and where you want to gain different skills, and then paying attention to things as they come up in different events.
Yeah, I think so the way I kind of broke it down, at least for me, was like I had certain clubs that were recruiting focused, certain things that were kind of social, and then maybe some that were a little bit more academic or learning in nature. And so I kind of personally have one from each of those buckets that I'm super involved in. And there's other clubs and things that I think are like super interesting. I might not be a member, but we'll still attend events, or I might get some of their newsletters or things like that forwarded to me. So I feel like time management is like the one thing that every MBA probably is constantly struggling with. Club involvement doesn't make that any easier, but I also think it enriches your experience so much that you'll find a way to make it work for the things that you are really passionate about.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think just in my first year, I just kind of took a trial and error approach. So I kind of cast a wide net, went to a lot of different events, and then just figured out kind of who I connected with the most and where I felt like I would be able to really jump in and get involved. But everyone has different approach kind of depending on your goals and your interests.
So there was one question that was around if the quality of education is negatively impacted with so many students kind of leading a lot of these things. And I just wanted to be clear, like most of these things are set up by faculty or staff and are facilitated. So the funds all have faculty advisors. The Open Road is completely organized and facilitated by the Business Plus Impact and our Zell Lurie Center for Entrepreneurship. The classes are obviously all led by faculty. So we are very, very deliberate in enabling students to have leadership roles and be able to take those things on. But there are certainly a number of faculty and staff that are involved in these experiences. So I wanted to make sure that question was clear. The last question I think might be a good one. I know we're coming up on 1 o'clock here. So the last question I thought we might land on is if there are, like a lot of these experiences are very educational and enjoyable as well. And so are there partners or family members that are involved in any of your extracurriculars? Anybody? I don't know if you guys have any experience with that.
So I think one thing I didn't talk about from a more social perspective, this isn't really action learning, but I'm on the board of the Whiskey Club, and we do have partners who are involved with the club. We have partners who are involved. I'm doing right now. I'm leading an event that we're trying to span across other clubs, some of the cultural Fendi clubs, and there are partners who are actively involved in that. Some of the partners, had to move from other continents, and I think the partners are 100% actively involved in the culture here.
All right. With that said, it is not just the partners; the students are involved. It is a great experience overall at Ross, and it's now 1 o'clock. So I am going to end the webinar. But thank you all for coming along with us to learn about action-based learning experiences. It's something we are very proud of at Ross, and clearly our students are very passionate about, and they're very impactful experiences. So thanks again for listening, and go Blue. Good job, guys. Good.